In this video I want to take a look at a concept of range of reasonable responses in unfair dismissal cases. So I'm going to take a look at that right after this. Okay, in any unfair dismissal claim, in any unfair dismissal case, if I'm acting for the employee, regardless of what the reasons for the dismissal are, I will nearly always argue that the sanction of dismissal is excessive and disproportionate, and that a lesser sanction should have been considered or imposed. That leads on, though, to the question of what is a fair dismissal, what is a reasonable response for an employer. And if there's one thing that you need to take from this video, it is that there is a range of reasonable responses depending on the employer, depending on the employer's resources, depending on the seriousness of the conduct of the employee in any particular set of circumstances. There's a range of reasonable responses that an adjudicating body, for example the Workplace Relations Commission, or indeed a court, will accept as being reasonable. But the key point is this: the court or the Workplace Relations Commission or the Labour Court will not substitute their decision making or their view or their worldview or their judgment of the decision for the employer. In other words, they recognise that the employer is ultimately entitled to make the decision as to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And once that decision, once that response to dismiss falls within a sort of range of reasonableness, then the WRC or the court will not impose their view or their decision on the situation. In other words, they won't say, what would we have done in those circumstances? They will look at the circumstances of the particular case, they look at the particular employer and employee, they look at the size of the company, they look at the resources, and then they will say, did that employer make a decision to terminate? Does it fall within a range of reasonable responses? And if it does, well then the decision-making body, court or the WRC or the Labour Court, will not substitute its judgment for that of the employer. I hope this is clear for you, because it's not always clear or straightforward or obvious what is fair or not fair in terms of a decision to terminate, and it will vary from employer to employer and from situation to situation, because what may be very, very serious conduct in one situation may not be viewed quite so seriously in another particular workplace or with another employer, depending on the industry, etc., etc. So what might pass, for example, for horseplay in perhaps, on a farm or in an agricultural setting, may not be acceptable, under any circumstances in perhaps a retail or banking environment. So these factors will be looked at, but ultimately the question is, did the employer make the decision to terminate the employment? Did that decision fall within a range of reasonable responses? And if it did, well then the employer will probably be held to have acted reasonably to terminate in all of the circumstances, and it will not be an unfair dismissal. Clearly the whole question of what's disproportionate or what's excessive is very much a subjective matter to a certain degree, and as I say, it will depend on the particular circumstances, the size of the company, the size of the workforce, the length of service of the employee in question, whether the employee in question has a history of disciplinary issues or this is an uncharacteristic one-off. So, these are all factors. Bottom line though is, and I am repeating myself, but the WRC or the court will not substitute their judgment for that of the employer. They recognise the employer is entitled to make the decision, and once it falls within a range of reasonable responses, well then that will probably be accepted. I hope you find this video useful. If you do, you might comment or down below, or like it or share it with your friends or colleagues or somebody that you feel might benefit from it, and you may be interested in subscribing to my YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.